friends, welcome back to TechnoGeek SFDC. So in today's video, we are going to talk about collections, loopings, and how you can use these two together in Salesforce or in Apex more specifically if I tell. So first thing, let's see what collections are. Okay, so collections are basically used, or collection are the variables basically used to store number of similar kind of elements. Okay, so for example, let's take an example to understand it more better. So let's say you get a requirement where you need to create, let's say around 500 or 600 string variables. Okay, where you need to basically work on 500 or 600 types of strings. Okay, now there are two ways. Either you go on creating those many variables, 500 600 variables in your Apex, and then work on it. Another way is you create a collection. Okay, a collection type, a variable of type collection, and you can store all your different types of strings, like let's say 500 different types of strings you have. Okay, so you can store all those types of strings in one collection variable. This makes your Apex more dynamic in nature, as well as you can work more efficiently on large number of elements, or you can say, let's say string or integer or any s object. So large number of similar kind of elements you can work using collections. So they are basically used to store the similar kind of element more than one. Okay, so let's say if you have more than one similar kind of string or let's say integer or s object, you can use collections to work on them. Now, in Apex, there is no limit on number of data you can put it in a collection variable, but there is a heap size limit in Salesforce. Okay, so regarding the heap size, we will again discuss in our further videos when we'll go on the further advanced topics. But for now, you can just consider that yes, there is a heap size limit which we need to always think, but there is no number of data limit in the collection variables. Okay, now in Apex, we have three types of collection variables: list, set, and map. So we will see one by one what these three are, how they are different from each other. Okay. So what is a list? List, as it's a simple word. You can understand that list is basically used to collect the similar kind of elements. Okay, or basically they are ordered collections. Ordered collection means in the list, whenever you are inserting any element into it, it will go in an ordered basis. It will be basically stack over each other. So let's say you have a list variable. First time you added one variable, or let's say you have added one string into it, it will go and sit down on the first zeroth index. That is, it will become the first element of the string, of the list. Okay. Similarly, if you are going and adding another string, it will become the second element of the string. So it will go in an order how you are inserting the element into the collection variable, or basically in a list. Okay. Now, list can be, it can be a collection of any types of data type. It can be a primitive data type, like your string, integer, date, datetime, all these stuffs. It can be a S object, it can be a user-defined type, or it can be a built-in Apex type. Okay. So user-defined type or built-in Apex type, this again we will discuss as we will go forward. Like here we have a concept of wrapper classes and all that we will discuss in more detail. You will get to know. But you can just for now, you can consider that list can contain any type of similar elements. It can be like primitive data type, S object, Apex type, user defined, anything. Okay. Now, how the elements in a list will be distinguished, or how you can find out that yes, uh, this element is present here or at this position in the list. Okay, so this can be defined by the term index in the list. Okay, so as soon as you insert, or as soon as you add one element into a list, that element will be assigned with an index number into it. Okay, so by using that index number, you can easily find out that okay, this particular element is present in which position. Okay, so for example, let's say you have a list variable. First time you are entering, you can say a list of string. Okay, it's a you have defined a collection of string variables of type list. Now, first time you are adding a string into it. Okay, so what will happen? It will go and sit on the zeroth index. So basically, in collections, your indexes starts with 0. Okay, so what will happen to the element which you have inserted? You have kept it on a zeroth index. So as soon as you will try to retrieve the the element which is present on zeroth index, you will receive the one which you have inserted first. Similarly, next time when you will again add any other element into it, it will go and sit on the first index. This is how, as soon as you will keep on adding the element into the list, it will keep on incrementing the index number and assign to that particular element, so that you, whenever you want to retrieve, you can easily retrieve based on the index number from the list. Okay. Now, list a list can not only be of primitive data type or something, it can be a nested list. So for example, you can have like list of a string, you can have a list of string, and like this it can go up to many level down. Okay, you can create a multi-dimensional kind of structure using collection variables. So list can contain another list, and the inner list can again contain an inner list. So in this way this hierarchy can go on. Okay, so now let's see how how we can basically use list in our Apex. So in our previous video we had created a sample class here. Okay, so we will use the same class to see how list can be used. Okay, so basically to use a list in Apex you need to first create a variable of type list. Okay, so how do we do that? So for that we give like the first, whether it should be public or private, and then it will be like list of whatever your collection type is, whether this collection type is of string or whether this collection type is of integer. One thing we need to keep in mind, let's say if you are declaring this as a string, okay, let's say the collection variable you are declaring as a string, then you cannot store an integer or a datetime into it. It has to be the same type which you have used while declaring the variable. So let's say I'm just creating a variable. Okay, collection var. Okay, so now we have defined this. Okay, but we need to also initialize it so that we can assign some memory allocation and Apex can see that yeah, this list is ready to be used. Okay, or ready to be assigned values into it. So for that, what we need to do, we need to basically use your variable name equals new list of string. This is called initialization of the variable or initialization of the collection here. Okay, so here you have created a collection variable and then you have just initialized it. Okay, now you have initialized this collection variable. Now we will start on adding the elements into it. Okay, so how do we add elements? So if you see like in the Salesforce documentation regarding the list, there are multiple methods you can use it, but one of the very most commonly used method is dot add. Okay, when you have to add a value into the list. So how we do that? For that we will be using the variable that is collection where dot add. It's a method. Okay, so add, again then function, and then whatever the string you want to add into it. So let's say I'm just giving I'm at 0 index. Okay, and then again I will use collection where dot add I am at index 1. Okay, now what we have done here, we have added two data into this collection variable. Okay, and these data are of type string. String basically how? Because we have defined it between the quotes, so this has become string. Now we have added the collection variables, and as I was telling, whenever you add any value into the collection variable in the list type, okay, this is the difference. in the list type when you are adding it, it will be assigned with an index number. So the first element which I have used here, this has been assigned with index 0. Next, whatever you have added here, this has been assigned with index 1. Okay. Now, if I have to, let's say, see whatever the value is present in the index 0. So for that, we can use system.debug uh, index 0 check. Now, how can I retrieve the value which is present on the index 0? So for that, we use the variable name, okay, and then with a square bracket, you will give the index number, and it will be an integer because whatever the index your index system provides to that particular data is always of integer type. So this will become an integer. Okay. Now, this particular syntax, that is your collection var 0, this will return me the data which is present on the 0th index. And as per code, I should get this. Okay. Similarly, we can just check for index 1. Okay. Now let's try to execute this and we will see this in running. So this is the one, and then, okay, my first class, and I do an execute. Okay. So now at the index 0, we were, if you remember, we have assigned this value, that is I am on 0 index. This string has been retrieved on the 0th from the 0th index, and this has been retrieved from the index 1. Okay. So this is how your list works basically in Apex, where you define the list collection variable. While defining, you give them like what type of collection it will be, whether it will be any primitive type or any S object or anything. Okay. And then next is you start assigning the values into it. Okay, by using add. Similarly, you have lot of functions from Salesforce to use, like remove, or you can use add all. Add all basically use, like if you want to add all the element of one list into another list, so there you use add all. Okay. And again, there are many functions which you can use based on your day-to-day requirement. Okay. Now, this is what we have seen is an ordered list or ordered collection. One of the demerit of the ordered collection is that it can contain the duplicate values as well. Okay. So for example, let's say I have this collection where here. Okay. Now, if I do the same thing here again. Okay. So now on the 0th index and index 2, I have the same value. That is, list allows storing of duplicate values into it. Okay. And this is one of the demerit where, let's say if you get a requirement where the collection variable should not have the duplicate values, there you cannot use list. There are other ways to first check and then do the assignment, but out of the box there is no way that you can avoid storing the duplicate into it. Okay. So to avoid this issue, we have another collection variable type in Apex, that is called set. Okay. So what is set? Sets are basically unordered collection of the element, of the similar element. Okay. So unordered collection means whenever you are adding the let's say whenever you are adding an element into the set type, okay, it will not be assigned to any index value. It can it can be stored in the collection, but there is no proper sequence that yeah, this has been stored in this sequence only. Okay. So that's why it is known as unordered collection of unique element, because it is not in the proper ordering. Okay. And that's the main reason sets doesn't have indexes into it. Okay. So this is one of the major difference between list and set. In list, if you want to, let's say, retrieve the element which is present on any, let's say, second element of the list, then you can use the index and get directly that value. But in set, it is not possible. If you want to do that, you need to again, you know, iterate over all the elements of the set and then retrieve the second element. So these are two major drawbacks of set here. Okay. Now let's say again, set can also connect can contain the nested level. Nested level means set of string can a set can again contains a set into it. For example, uh, set can have something like set of set of string. So this is called nested collections. Okay, so set can also have nested collection into it, but it can go only up to 7 levels inside. So so like this, you can define up to 7 level inside the set. So nested collection in a set can go up to 7 levels. Okay. Now let's see how we can use the set in our Apex. So to use the set, again, we need to define a variable of type set, public set, and then let's say I'll just keep it a string again. Okay. Set var check. And then again getter setter. So all about getter setter you and these variables I have already created a video earlier, so you can go and have a check on that. Okay. Now similar to list, again we have just created a variable. Now we will initialize the set. So if you see the notice the difference between syntax, wherever we were using list earlier, now we are using set. Okay. Now I'll just copy this whole stuff again here and I will assign to set now. Okay. Now if you see here, I am trying to add a duplicate into the set. Okay. Set can also have the same set is having again the same add method to add element into it. Okay. Now here I am trying to add duplicate value into it. Let's see how the system behaves. So I'll just do one thing. I'll check and then I'll just try to print the set. So on the runtime, it will not display any error if you try to add a duplicate variable in the set. Okay, but in the execution time, let me open the debugs. Yeah. So in the execution time, if you see, it has assigned, I mean, it has taken only one value. Here I was trying to assign two values of same type, same string, but it only took one value. This shows that set always work on the uniqueness. The value which will be present in the set will be unique in nature. Okay, so now we have seen list is an ordered collection where by using the index you can retrieve the element, but it can contain the duplicates. Opposite to that, sets doesn't have any indexes. Like you cannot retrieve any value something like index 0. Okay. So let's say if I define something like this, okay, here you will get an exception basically. It will not allow you to save the class. It will be compilation error because indexes are not supported on set. Okay. Now, now you must be thinking that both are having its own merit and demerit. But let's say you you get a requirement where you want to work on the uniqueness as well as you want some ways to directly retrieve the directly retrieve the data without iterating over the collection variable. Okay, then what? So to fulfill this requirement, we have our third type of collection variable in the system or in the Apex, that is known as Apex. Okay, Apex, sorry, that is called as map. Okay, so map is something which is very much widely used in Apex. Okay, and it is very important to understand where you can use map. So map is a basically it's a collection only, but it is of value key and value pair. Okay, so whatever the data you are entering into the map, you define a key for that. Okay, it's a manual defined key. So that map or the collection, so that the system knows that for this particular key, this is the data which is stored in the collection variable. Okay, now the value can be of any type. Again, it can be a primitive, normal string, integer, anything. It can be a collection variable as well. So the values in map, it can contains a collection variable like list of string, or again, set of string, or again, it can also contain map again. A map with a key and the value is again a map. That is also possible. That type of scenarios are also there. Okay, so this is also feasible in Apex. Now, usually to define a key, okay, we use the primitive data types, but again, you can use S objects as well in the key, but there is a, slight twist into it where we need to use the hash coding for making the S object as a unique in nature to store as a key. This hash coding we will see when we will work on the our advanced Apex side. But for now, maps are basically key value pair where keys are, you can say it's an indicator to a data in the collection. Okay. Now let's see how we use map in our Apex. So again, for map, what we need to do, will again create a variable. Okay, string and string. Okay. Now, one second, map where check. So now if you notice the syntax between the map and other collection variables, in other collection variables you had only one input parameter where you're defining that yes, this is of type string or this is of type integer. Okay, but in map you need to provide two types. Okay, two input types. First will define that your key will be of what type. So in my case it is telling that my key is of type string. Okay, and the value which is corresponding to that key is of what type. Okay, again, it doesn't need to be the same. These two can be different. Key and value pair data types can be different. I can keep integer, I can keep as object, I can keep, let's say, date, time, anything. Okay, for now I'll just keep it as string. Okay, so here we have declared a map of variable name as map where check, whose key is of type string and whose value is also of type string. So the value corresponding to that key is again of type string. Now we will try to initialize it. Okay, if we are not initializing it, system will not know that this variable is ready to use in Apex. And that's where you will be facing the null pointer exceptions for these collection variables. So it's mandatory to initialize it. Okay. Now, to initialize a map variable, again, you need to use new map and then string comma string. Okay. Now, in list and set, we were using add functionality to basically um, add the values into it. But in map, it's a different. In map, we use something called put. Okay, where we can where we'll be using the put method here. First value what you are entering will go as a key. Okay, so let's see. I'm giving key one. Second entry what you are giving, or the second parameter what you are giving, will go as a value corresponding to that particular key. I am at key one. Okay, so your first value, so basically your key becomes this key one text, and if I try to retrieve the value which is present on key one text, I will get this, the value which you have assigned. Okay, I'll just add one more into this key 2. I am at key 2. Okay. So here we have defined map and we have added some values into it. Okay. Now, one more thing to notice in this, or one more thing to take a note in this, is that in maps basically your key will always be unique. Okay. So let's say if I try to do a copy paste here and I'm at key 3. Okay. Now if you see, I am trying to insert one more data with type key 2 and having a different value. Okay. But in my map collection, there is already an entry with type key 2, with key as key 2. Okay. So what system will do? System will not make any additional entry. Instead of that, system will replace the existing entry. So let's say on the here line number 18, I have used like map.put key 2, I am at key 2. Okay. So till here, my key 2 key is holding a value that is I am at key 2. But as soon as this line gets executed, map will replace the value which is present on key 2 with this value. Okay, that's how uniqueness comes in the map, because the keys which are present in a map are always unique in nature. Okay, so this is also one thing to keep in mind. Now, we were also discussing that before, when we started discussion on the map, we discussed the ease of getting the values from a map. So how that happens? Okay, so in list, we have something called indexes. Okay, map value retrieve. Okay. So in list, you have something called indexes based on which you can directly get the values. In set, you don't have any index, but they are unique in nature. Map is unique in nature, but the so the index which is present in list, similarly, we have the keys which are present in map. Okay. So by using the get method of the map, you can get the values which is present at a particular key. Okay. So how we can do that? So I have a map here. Okay, dot get, and then this in. I am using this particular key. Okay, got it. So what this is doing, what this particular syntax is doing, it will give me the data which is stored at key 1. That is, I am at key 1. This string it will return me. If it is of type integer, it will return me integer. So whatever the data you have stored on that particular key will be retrieved by using this particular syntax. Okay, now let's try to execute this. So if you see on the map value retrieve, I got the value that is I am at key 1. This is the value or the data which I had assigned to this key 1 key. Okay, so this is how maps basically work. It is having unique keys, and by using the keys you can directly extract the data from map. So these are the three different types of collection variables which we have in Salesforce. Okay, I hope you got an idea of how the collection variable or what are the different types of collection variables we have in Salesforce. Okay, now this was something collection variable which we spoke about, and these types of variables many times they are used during the bulkification or to write an efficient coding, because you don't want to write declare each and every variable for each and every string or a subject type. Instead you can use the collections. Next is loop in Apex. So first thing, let's try to understand why we need loop in Apex. Okay, so let's say you get a business requirement where you need to do some kind of processing on, let's say, 500 strings. Okay, so the initially you will be thinking that okay, I need to write 500 times the same code, with the different variables or different strings which I will get as an input. But that is not an efficient way of coding. So efficient way of coding is you will use the loops into it where you can execute the same code again and again until your exit conditions are being met. Okay. So loops in Apex are basically used to execute the same method again and again. Okay. Now in Apex we have four types of loops. First is your for loop, and for each you have then while loop, you have do while loop. Okay, so let's start with for loop. For loop is a, I would say, it's a very basic looping mechanism. It's not only used in Apex, but it's used in many other languages as well, like your Java or JavaScript. It's being used in multiple languages. Now, how the how the for loop works here? In for loop, traditional for loop basically, you have three parameters into it. First parameter is your init statement. Init statement is something where you can define the variables which you want to use into your loop. Okay. Second is your exit condition. Exit condition states that at what point you want to exit from this particular loop. Okay. And third is your incremental statement. Incremental statement states that when it needs to execute the next loop, or you can say the next round of code execution. How we use for loop in our day-to-day Apex, or let's take an example for this. Okay, so for example, again the same case I will tell you. Let's say you get a requirement where you need to print, you can say okay, so you need to print the number from 1 to 100. Okay, or let's say you want to print, let's say 1 to 10. We'll keep it 1 to 10, small one only. Okay, so how we can do that? First thing is either you define, multiple, um, you can define multiple variables like 10 variables, assign the values 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 to them, and then you can display it. Another way is you can use the loop here. So how we can use loop? For that, we will use a for loop. So how we basically write for loop in our Apex? For that, we have our syntax called for. Then we had the init statement, right? Init statement was telling that whatever the variables you want to use in this particular loop, you can initialize them here. Okay. So let's say I want to use one integer I, and I'm assigning its first value to 0. Okay. Next is what is my exit condition into this? Okay. So what my exit condition will be that till the time I is not equal to 10, this loop should continue. So I'll give I less than 10. And then my incremental value. This means this particular variable I need to increment so that my second execution happens. So here I will be using I++. Now I will just put system.debug. Okay. So now what it will do, it will print the value of I. Okay. Or yeah, it will print the value of I. Let's try to execute this. Okay, so now if you see, the I value is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 till 9. So why it has came here till 9? Because here you have initialized the I integer value with 0, and the exit condition we have given that I is less than 10. So this means till 9. As soon as the I became 10 here, okay, this for loop got broke and the execution came out of this loop. Okay, and that's why this printing didn't happen. Now if I give I equal to less than syntax will be something like this. Then it will print the 10, it will print 10 as well inside this. And then in the third parameter, I am incrementing the value of I with 1. Okay. So what I'm doing in this loop is basically initialize the I and then put an exit condition that when this for loop should exit, and then I'm incrementing the I value so that it will, so what will happen here? Okay, so let's go one by one step. Okay, your first statement got executed, I equals 0. Your this code got executed. So next time it checked the exit condition. Okay, 0 0 is less than equal to 10. So its system knows that yeah, I need to go inside the loop. It came here inside the loop and executed this value, this statement. Okay, now after this it came to our third parameter here, that is the incremental way. Here what it did, it incremented the value of I to I with a 1. Okay, so it will become whatever the previous value was, I, that is 0, it added 1 to it. So now what happened, my I became 2 and again this execution started. So this particular variable, this particular condition, the first statement, it only executes first time. Okay, so here as soon as my I became 1, again my exit condition was checked, that whether it is less than equal to 10. It was true. Again it came here, it executed the code, and then again it came to my third parameter. It incremented to one more value, so it has become 2. And this process kept on running until unless my exit condition was met. As soon as the exit condition was met, this came out of the loop. Okay. So one thing to remember here, your init statement or the first parameter in the for loop will always execute once during the first execution. Okay. After that, your second and third parameter will keep on executing until unless your exit conditions are being met. So this is the traditional for loop what we have in our system. Okay, but it is also having its own limitation, because here you need to define the exit condition, you need to define the incremental statements, you need to define the init statements and all these things. Okay, so this is little bit complex. So there is a simpler version of for loop, that is for each loop. What for each loop do? For each loop is basically working on the collection, that is it can be a list, set, uh, values of map, anything. It can be a collection. Okay. Now, for each loop will not look for any exit condition. It will keep on executing until unless it reaches the last value of your collection variable. Okay. So we will see how this for each loop works now. So here we saw the for statement. We will just comment it out. Okay. Now, if you remember, we had this something called collection var here. Okay, this was a list type collection, so I will use the same collection type. In for each loop, first you need to define the type. Okay, what is the data type on which you are looping in? Okay, so in our case it is string, and then you need to provide a local name. What local name is? This particular local name will be assigned to the variable or to the data, okay, in the collection, so that it can be referred in our internal system. So I will tell you how that works. str, and then we have collection var. Now, okay, so if you see, collection var is of type list of string. That's why I have defined here as string, because I am working or I am iterating on the data which is of type string. Now I am giving a local name to each and every iteration. So here I have three values into it. When the loop will execute first value, this is the first value, I am at 0 index, it will assign a local name to it, that is str. Okay, so now here inside the loop, str becomes the identity of that particular data which is currently in the loop. Okay, so let's see how we execute this. I'll just put data check. if you notice here, I am using str because this is the local name of the particular data which is currently in the loop. Okay, and that's where you can use the local name. And let's say if currently, since we are only working on a string, but let's say if you're working on s objects, or if you're working on any object type, then you can use str dot field names to get the further deep down values. But here it will be str. Okay, and I'll try to save it. 1 second. Okay, I have where okay, this one. Yeah, it got saved. Okay, now I will just try to execute. So now if you check, okay, so the data which is being printed, that is str. Okay, here we haven't defined any exit condition or anything. This loop went again and again till the time it reaches the last value of, or the last index of this of the collection variable, that is list. You can say last value because here you can use sets as well, you can use list as well. So whatever, so it will until unless it reaches the last value, this loop will keep on executing. And after reaching the last value, it will automatically come out of the loop and your loop will get over there. Okay, so this is a basic difference between for loop and for each loop. In for loop, we define exit conditions, we define the incremental statements. But in for each loop, you don't need to define any exit statement. You can just, give the collection, and system will automatically take it the last index as the exit condition. Okay, now we have two more concepts here. uh, you know Two more concepts basically, that that is something called break and continue. So what is the use of these two? Okay, now let's say you get a requirement that 1 second. Okay, so let's say you get a requirement that you need to based on certain condition, you need to bypass the code which is present in for loop for an element. Okay, so so let's take an example. Let's say if I get a requirement that if my string contains 0, then I don't need to print it. Okay, if my string contains 1, then only I need to print it. Okay, so what we do in that case, we use basically continue. What continue is to, continue will bypass all the code present in the loop below below the continue statement, and it will go to the next iteration. Okay, so let's say if I use continue here, okay, then what will happen? It will not print this debug statement, okay, because continue statement is telling that, okay, we are done with this iteration, now move to next iteration. So initially when my first value will come here, that is this, okay, then continue got executed. So continue told that, okay, we are done with this iteration, that is I am at 0 index, now move to next iteration. So in this way, you can directly go to your next iteration based on your conditions. This is where continue gets used. Continue is basically telling the iterator that we are done here. Now go to the next element which is present in the collection variable. Okay. Similarly, let's say you get a requirement that based on certain condition you want to come out of the loop completely. Okay. So as we were telling that in for each, it goes on executing until unless it reaches the last element in the collection variable. But let's say you have 10 elements in the collection variable. I want to break, or I want to basically execute only first three collection variables. Then in those types of scenarios, the break condition will come into picture, where as soon as you will write break here, okay, it will come out of the loop. So it will not execute any further elements which is present in the if which is present in your collection variable, it will directly come out of the loop. So these are the two uh, ways, or you can say these are the two functions of loopings, which is not only present in Apex, this has been used in multiple other languages as well. But these are very much useful feature of the loopings in Apex, where you can use continue and break. Continue is basically to to skip all the other lines of code and just execute the next element present in collection variable, and break is used to break the loop completely and just come out of that particular loop, maybe for loop, while loop, anything. So these were the first two loops which we have in Apex, that is a for loop and for each loop. One more thing, most of the codes you will be seeing for each loop will be used in the system. Okay, so for each loop, because it's easy to write and it is quite simple to execute, so majorly you see for each loop in your Apex classes. Next is your while loop. Okay, while loop is again, it will be used to execute the same code again and again until your conditions are being met. Okay, so the syntax of base while loop is where you give while and then your condition. So until unless this condition is true, your code will be executing in the block. As soon as your condition become false, your code will stop executing and your loop will break. Okay, so how we use while in our system? So for that, we use the keyword called while. Let's say I am just using an integer here, integer I equals 0. Okay, now I am giving a condition into this that I is less than 5. Then system.debug I value check string dot value of I, and then it will be I plus plus. Okay, so now here what I am doing in my while loop, I have given a condition that I should be less than 5. Okay, so till the time the value of I, that is initially 0 here, is less than 5, this loop will keep on executing. Okay, and then inside loop what I am doing, I'm just printing the I value and incrementing the value of I by 1. So initially it will be 0, so it will print here 0 and then it will make I as 1, that is 0 plus 1. Again, it will go to while condition. It will check that, okay, I value is currently 1, which is still less than 5. So it will again execute the code which is present in the uh, while loop. This thing will happen back to back again and again till the time I value becomes 5 or more. So as soon as I value become 5 here, the condition will tell that, okay, now I value is not less than 5 because 5 is not less than 5. So this will become false and your loop will break here. Okay, so this is how your while loop works. If you want, we can just run this code again and we will see. So as I was telling, it kept on going until unless your I value was less than 5. Okay, so this is again a type of looping in Apex which you can use, where you can define while and then the condition, and then your code will keep on executing until unless your condition is true. Okay, as soon as the condition become false, it will come out of the loop. This is called while loop in Apex. Okay, and the last one is do while. So there is a slight difference between while and do while. As you have seen that in while we are first giving the condition here. Okay, but let's say you get a scenario where first time your code has to execute. Okay, irrespective of whatever the condition is, your code has to execute and then it should start checking the values or start checking the conditions. In that type of scenario, you will go ahead with the do while loop. Okay, where you are first, you are telling system to execute this statement first and then uh, 1 second, and then keep on checking whatever the conditions are present. Okay, so in this case, let's say we have do while loop here. Okay, now let me see if I equals 0, if I is less than 0. Okay, now what will happen here? If I put this while condition, if I put this condition in while condition, my debug will not get printed. The reason is first time only it saw the condition, it became false and it came out of the loop. So it never executed the code present in the loop. But what do while is telling? Do while is telling that boss execute the code first at least once, then go and check the condition. If condition is matching, then again you execute the code. Otherwise, just go forward from there. Okay, don't execute the code, come out of the loop. So do while is making the system to execute the code at least once, in at least once, even though it is not matching the criteria. Okay, so we will just try to execute. We'll see here. Okay, so if you see, okay, line number 46, you got a debug called 0. Even though my condition was telling that you have to execute this until unless I is less than 0, still my code got executed once because of the do statement what we have. So this is a very slight but a very important difference between while and do while loop. In while loop, till the time your conditions are getting matched, your conditions are true, your code will execute inside the loop. But in do while loop, it will execute the first time even though your conditions are not being met. Okay, so these are the these are the major difference between while and do while loop in the system. Okay, so these are basically these are the loopings in Apex. So in today's video we saw what are the collection variables, you know, what are the loopings in Apex. Okay, and if you see on any enterprise level company or any big companies, even small companies as well, basically wherever the apex are being used, you will see that the collection variables and loopings are used on a, you know, very regular basis. You will see lot of collection variables, lot of loopings happening in the apex to write the efficient code and, you know, to get a good outcome, the expected outcomes. So with this we will close up the today's video. I hope you got an idea of what loopings are, what collection variables are, and I hope you I hope you it benefited you in increasing your knowledge, and see you soon. We will come up with more videos. If you like the video, please do subscribe and please do like the video and share with your friends. Thank you. Thanks for your time. Bye bye.